Hofker, and I am from Lindbergh High School. The title of my project is The Impact of Inclusion Programs for High School Students with and Without Special Needs. I decided to do this project because I realized that the students with special needs at my school ate lunch at a table in the corner of the cafeteria by themselves, and I wanted to do something to help. So I worked with teachers and student organizations at my school to start Lunch Club, a program that pairs students with and without special needs to eat lunch together 2 days a week. Okay, so my hypothesis was that the students with special needs will improve in social skills and mental well-being over a 6-week period as compared to a control group. And then previous research hadn't really seen how programs like this benefit the students without special needs, beyond that they don't harm them and it helps within the scope of the program itself. But I hypothesized that their attitudes towards disabilities will also increase more than those of the control group over a 6-week period. Okay, this is really important because 1 in 6 students has some form of developmental disability. So this affects a lot of people. And a lot of these developmental disabilities, including autism, one of the more common ones, affects social skills, which are important for so many things, whether it's getting a job or giving a presentation, that some experts have even pointed out that this is the most important intervention outcome. Lately, there has been a bigger focus on including students with special needs in mainstream classes. However, they found issues with peer acceptance, which is where programs like Lunch Club come in. There has been research on similar programs at the preschool and elementary school levels. However, there has been no research at the middle or high school levels, which is really a shame because this is where the peer relationships become even more important, and high school is the last chance to teach students social skills before they age out of the school system. So for my project, I recruited students with and without special needs from Lunch Club, as well as from other student organizations and classes within my own school, and from 2 demographically similar schools. All in all, for the students with special needs, I had 5 in the intervention group and 10 in the control group. Then for the students without special needs, I had 23 in the intervention group and 4 in the control group. And I had all of my participants fill out surveys at the beginning of the school year, and then again after participating in the program are of no change for the control group. And then I was able to compare the scores using a repeated measures ANOVA. And for the peers without special needs, I found that the age was statistically different between the 2 groups. So I took that into account as a covariate when doing my analysis. So for social skills, I used the social and communication subscales of the Autism Spectrum Quotient questionnaire, and I had the teachers fill out the questionnaires at the beginning and then again after 6 weeks. One of the things I looked at with all of my questionnaires was the reliability. In general, we want it to be above 0.7, which I did not see for the individual subscales. Oops, sorry. And a lower score is better for all subscales. And oh, sorry, by the way, with the reliability, since it was poor in future research, I'm going to want to use a different measurement. And then for this project, it's something to keep in mind when analyzing my data. So with that being said, here are my results. I can't figure out how to use the laser pointer on this, but the middle one is the communication subscale, and that was statistically significant, with the control group actually improving more than the intervention group. The first thing I noticed when I saw this that might explain why is that the initial scores are pretty different between the 2 groups. Since they were very similar groups at demographically similar schools, you wouldn't expect this to be the case. However, since Lunch Club started before I actually started collecting data, you'd hope that there would still be an improvement, but since many of the participants participated in the past, there could be some residual effect, and that has been shown in previous studies on social skills interventions. They have found that the results can be persistent over a 3-month period, which is roughly equivalent to summer vacation. And then the other thing is it measures the more hard rules of social communication that aren't explicitly taught through an informal program like Lunch Club, and you wouldn't necessarily expect someone to pick up over a 6-week, 6-hour intervention period. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And one way to improve the program might be to incorporate more social skills instruction within it. I also measured mental well-being. To do this, I used the Goodman Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire, and again, I had the teacher fill this out. This one had 5 subscales for emotional stability, conduct, hyperactivity, peer problems, and prosocial behavior, and a lower score was better for the reliability for this one was not a huge concern. And the measurement itself is not designed to be normally distributed. However, I did normality testing to figure out that my data was, so I was able to meet the normality requirement for ANOVA testing. So with that being said, here are the results. For the emotional subscale, I basically saw the same thing I saw on the communication subscale, which is that it was statistically significant, but the control group actually improved more. And then again, I see the initial difference between the two groups. And then another thing when I was analyzing my data was one of the data points from the intervention group really got worse over the course of the study, and not to the point of being an outlier, but with a small sample size, one data point can skew your mean a little. So ideally, future research would use larger sample sizes. The other two that I'd like you to look at are the peer problems in prosocial behavior. These are the two where the intervention group did show an increase, and though it was not statistically significant, they improved more than the control group for peer problems. And since this was a very short-term study, I'd really be interested in seeing how great the difference would be over a 1 semester, 1 year, even a 4-year period instead of a 6-week period. So then, like I said, I also wanted to see the effects on the students without special needs. So I found a questionnaire that measures their attitudes towards disabilities. And I had the participants fill this one out themselves. I modified the questionnaire in a few ways to meet my needs. The most significant change was changing the wording from intellectual disability to special needs, and I chose to do this to represent the larger range of abilities that you see within Lunch Club and within the population as a whole. And I did have that change approved by a special education teacher. And then the reliability was not a concern for this one. And the intervention group did improve on all 4 subscales, and for the knowledge of capacity and rights, it was statistically significant, with the intervention group finally improving more. And this was really promising because 10 or 15 years from now, it's going to be the students without special needs that are going to be the ones making sure individuals with disabilities are well incorporated into the community. And that's going to go a lot better if they're knowledgeable about what people with disabilities are capable of and what rights they should have. I already suggested a lot of improvements for future research. And one thing that I'd like to point out a little more is a better way to measure social skills. For one, the reliability was terrible. And then another thing that's a problem with all the measurements but easier to eliminate with social skills is the bias, and that the person filling out the questionnaire knows whether or not the participant is receiving the intervention. So one way other studies have gotten around this is using a blinded trained observer to measure something like the number of times the person with special needs initiates contact with the students without special needs, and this has another advantage in that it is more quantitative. So that's something I would definitely like to try in the future. So basically, for a conclusion, at least over a short 6-week period, the program did not seem to have a huge benefit for the students with special needs. However, it was helpful for the students without special needs, especially in how knowledgeable they were about what individuals with disabilities are capable of. There are many people I would like to acknowledge. I worked with a total of 3 different schools, so there were tons of administrators and teachers that gave me all the approvals I needed and also helped me get forms to and from the participants and get informed consent and everything. I would especially like to thank Mrs. Daly, the teacher I worked with to help set up Lunch Club, Mrs. Robner, who supervised my research, and all of my participants who I absolutely could not have done this project without. Here are some of my references. And thank you. Are there any questions or are you doing questions?